If someone from Red Bull says it, I'm ready to sign a contract. Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Sela and today I'm going to talk about cesarean section versus natural birth and how did I dealt with PTSD and depression. So at the beginning I would like to say that if I will have to give birth 1,000 more times and it's possible, I would always choose natural birth. It's about my experience, so it's gonna make sense after you hear my story. Now, PTSD, I've got it after I gave birth to my first daughter, but I didn't know I have actually PTSD. I refuse to believe that I am sick. I'm going to tell you my story with dates and with some pictures here and there, and hopefully you will enjoy it or it will help someone to realize that sometimes we cannot control the way things are going, but we have mentally to be prepared for everything. I wasn't prepared for my emergency cesarean, and I think that had a big impact over what happened next. I gave birth on 24th of March 2020 with emergency C-section. On my pregnancy I had gestational diabetes, and this is why they have decided to induce birth at 39 weeks and 3 days. My pregnancy was far from that magical experience what everyone is talking about. Every single week I had appointments. 1 week I had appointment in the Grantham local hospital. Second week I had appointment at the Boston hospital. There was no week for me not to have to go to hospitals. It was annoying for my workplace, it was annoying for David's workplace, and it was annoying for both of us because constantly we had to ask at work to go for this appointment. So, as I said, because I had gestational diabetes, they decided to induce me at 39 weeks and 3 days. So, on 24th of March, I was fully dilated and ready to give birth. And here it's where my nightmare, what lasted for almost 2 years, started. So, while I was pushing, lots of doctors rushed into delivery room. Everyone was talking over each other, so I have no idea how they were able to understand each other, but I was understanding nothing. One doctor came next to me and he told me that they will bring me into the theater to help the baby to come out. They explained to me that they are just going to catch baby's head and grab a bit, so they help the baby come out. I was asking lots of times, is it going to be cesarean? And all the time I've been told that it's not case for cesarean, it's not gonna be cesarean, you don't have to worry. They bring me into the theater, they check the baby, and I've heard the doctor screaming, emergency cesarean, now. Everyone rushed around me. I got panicked. I had a panic attack. I started to scream, what's going on? I started to cry really, really badly. I was confused and scared. I didn't know what's gonna happen. Didn't pass 2 minutes and they cut me. I felt the way they cut me. I felt the cut. I felt how they were moving everything around me. I felt they were taking out the baby. I felt everything. Worst thing was that I stopped hearing. I hear just with one ear. And because of the stress, I stopped hearing completely. So on this side, was a nurse. I told her I cannot hear and I feel pain. She looked at the doctor. I've seen she was moving her mouth. I'm assuming she was telling him that I cannot hear and I feel pain. And she left. And that was all. I've seen David being so happy when he saw our baby girl, but at the same time he was worried for what's going on with me, and he had so many feelings. I was able to see so many emotions on his face in that moment that it was even more stressful. Now he came to me and he asked me if can I hear our baby girl, how she's crying. And I started to cry even worse because I wasn't able to hear my baby. I wasn't able to hear her cry. I understood what he said because I've seen his mouth. That helped me to understand what he asked me. We spent 4 days in a hospital. So we've got in the hospital Monday and they left us to go home Thursday night. Next day, after we've got home, I started to have fever and this weird shivering. We've called to GP, to midwife, to hospital. Everyone was saying the same thing. I have coronavirus and stay isolated. That was the only thing what they were telling me. Now, one midwife came Friday when we got home. That was before starting the shivering and the fever. She checked the baby, everything was fine. Sunday was supposed to come the midwife to check again the baby to make sure she's growing properly and she's feeding well. The midwife called me and she told me that she's not going to come because I have coronavirus and she don't want to catch it. She's sorry that this is the way this midwife patient thing ends, but she hopes I'm going to be well soon. That was the only thing what I've got from her. I felt worse and worse every single day. Now everyone has a body smell. I started to feel this really weird smell coming from myself, from my sweat, from my vagina, from everywhere. It was a weird smell, what wasn't normal at all. Now, one night, I started to feel a bit better. I managed to get on my own out from the bed. I went to the toilet, I came back, I laid in bed. Suddenly, I was shivering really badly. My temperature suddenly went really high. It was 41 degrees temperature. Suddenly I became white, completely white. David called to 111. He told them what's going on. They told me that most likely coronavirus, take paracetamol. That's what they said. Now, David got really scared. He saw the way I was looking and it was just not normal, so he decided to call for an ambulance. The ambulance crew came at around 11, if I remember right. They straight said that this is not coronavirus. They said that they cannot tell what it is exactly because they don't have the right equipment in the ambulance. I have to be brought to a hospital. Keep it in mind, in my town there is a hospital, but it has working hours. Now someone was in the hospital, a doctor, and the crew from the ambulance asked that doctor if he could come to check me. He said that he cannot come because if I'm dying, he don't want it to be on him and he doesn't have the right equipment. Also, they ask if can I be admitted to that hospital? And they said no, because it's not working hours. So the ambulance crew decided to bring me to Lincoln Hospital, it's 1 hour away from me. Yeah, next question for me was, do we go to hospital or not? They told me this. I had two options. I go to hospital and I am admitted on the coronavirus section, where I might get coronavirus, or I don't go to hospital, but God knows if I get 24 more hours with my baby. So the last decision and the final decision was on me to make it. I was so poorly, I didn't care anymore. They gave me some gas, what helped me to relax my body, and I wasn't shivering that hard anymore. I was happy with the gas. That made me happy. I told them to bring me to hospital. I was afraid. Hearing random, it was me, David, and the baby. His family, who lives here, they have their own life. We cannot ask them to help us constantly. So I was afraid of what's gonna happen with David and with the baby, because I didn't know how to take care of a newborn. David didn't know. We had to learn it, but we didn't got the chance of learning it because it was such a short time since we had the baby. Alright, so at 4 in the morning I got to the Lincoln Hospital. They admitted me into the coronavirus section. I was lucky there was no one. There was one more lady who, I remember she broke her finger somehow, but nobody who actually had coronavirus. So I consider I was lucky. From the coronavirus section, after they've done me the test and they saw that it's negative, they bring me into the maternity ward, where they took from me some blood samples, and there was this amazing lady. I remember the first midwife who took care of me. She was really friendly, very nice personality. So she got my analysis, and she said that I'm lucky to be there. Keep this in mind. Now, for 1 week, I've been in the hospital and nobody told me what I have. So I asked, like, what do I have? What's going on? And they told me I have a blood infection and I need antibiotics. So I was for 1 week on antibiotics. They told me the infection was in my uterus. We've got down to a weird machine and they said that they are going to drain the infection out. But when they did an x-ray, I think, they found out that the infection was behind my uterus and it was so thin that they weren't able to drain it. So they decided to leave it there and to give me more antibiotics so my body gets rid of the infection. Now, for 1 week, I was alone in the hospital. I was scared. I was away from my baby. My baby was with David at home. I was away from him. We was constantly talking on the phone, and I was constantly crying and feeling bad that I have to see my newborn through a phone camera, because God knows what actually happened. Now, when they were explaining me that it's a blood infection, they made it to sound like it's nothing serious, and that basically they said that don't worry, it's just an infection. But still, the first midwife told me that I was lucky to be there. After 1 week of antibiotics and pills and analysis and all that stuff, I finally got home. I'm gonna put here a picture with all the pills what I had to take 3 times a day. They were so many pills. Plus, I had a cannula in my arm, and they were putting antibiotics 3 times a day through the cannula as well. Now, since all these things happened, I started to have depression. Or at least I thought at some point that it's depression. I started to see things what weren't there. I started to see bad things. I started to become so paranoid, and it was terrible. So I was seeing that my little baby is hurt by someone, that someone tries to kill her. If people were behind me on the street, I was thinking that the next step they will stab me. I don't know why. I just started to have these horrible thoughts. I was lying to myself by saying that it's normal, even though I was feeling it's not normal, but I was lying to myself that it is. I didn't know how to ask for help or from who to ask for help. I was afraid even to David to tell what's going on. Now, in September, we decided that we want one more baby, even though I promised I'm never going to have any baby anymore after that traumatic experience. So on 24th of January 2021, we found out that we are expecting for our second baby. It was a brilliant feeling, even if I was a bit scared. Now, second pregnancy was brilliant. Nothing, but absolutely nothing the way the first one was. No lots of appointments, no diabetes, no stress, nothing. I didn't feel that I'm pregnant till 23 weeks. At 23 weeks pregnancy, I've got a phone call from the hospital from here in Grantham. They called me for a check and they asked me if I'm free that day. I said yes, I am, so I just went for the check. They found out my cervix started to dilate. So from 3 centimeter, my cervix were only 7 millimeter, what meant that anytime I could have give birth. They sent me to Lincoln Hospital urgently. They called me a taxi. I had nothing to me, nothing. It was just my maternity notes and my phone, nothing else. They sent me to the hospital with a taxi. In that hospital I was for 2 to 3 days. I don't remember exactly how many days. They've put me cervix stitches, and from that moment I wasn't allowed to do basically anything. I wasn't allowed to do much of work in the house. I wasn't allowed to stand too much. I wasn't allowed to pick up my baby or anything. It was a nightmare. After that surgery, I started to feel so tired from anything. Even before, I didn't felt I'm pregnant at all. After that surgery, I started to feel really tired, constantly exhausted, everywhere pain. It was terrible. Now, having those stitches, being back to the hospital, I think triggered something because I started to have nightmares. These nightmares were in the theater most of the time. It was one specific nightmare what was constantly repeating. I was in the theater and I was seeing the doctors, the midwives being dead around me. I was seeing blood on the floor. I was seeing that my baby is dead, that they try to kill me. I became afraid of going to sleep. I became afraid of going to hospitals. I had a huge fear of getting near hospital. The worst thing was I had this constant feeling that I am going to die. Day and night I had this fear that I am going to die or my baby is going to die. I cannot explain with words how it is to live with this fear 24/7. My midwife was off, so I had my appointment with another midwife. Now this, I'm gonna call her midwife 2. So midwife 2 didn't know anything about me, didn't know anything about my first birth experience, my first pregnancy, so she was just putting questions. She saw in the system how it was my first pregnancy and what I went through after the pregnancy. I told her that I had that infection, but was nothing serious. And she said, "Oh, I see you had sepsis." And I told her, "No, I didn't. I didn't have sepsis. I had just some infection, but nothing serious." Because this is how I thought. That's what I thought. That's what they have told me. And this midwife told me that, yeah, the infection is called sepsis. I was confused. I didn't know what's that. So I went out from the hospital and I googled. On the NHS website it wrote that sepsis is deadly if it's not treated in time. So it became even worse. It became even worse because I wasn't trusting anyone anymore. I didn't want it to see doctors. I didn't want it to give birth anymore. I don't know how to explain it with words, but it was terrible to think that I still have to go to hospital at some point. I wasn't trusting anyone except this midwife who told me the truth after 15 months. So after 15 months, I found out that I had sepsis. After 15 months, it destroyed my trust for anyone who is working in a medical service. I felt afraid of them. The worst thing that was that knowing now that sepsis was deadly and thinking back what happened for that entire week after I've got home, after I gave birth, how everyone just assumed that I have coronavirus without even trying to give me help, it was devastating. I couldn't believe that someone would let you to die just like that without even trying. They wasn't even trying to check if I've got anything else. They knew there are so many risks for a cesarean, but everyone just assumed it is coronavirus. That was so painful. Now, after 2 weeks, I had another appointment with the same with midwife 2. Midwife 1 was still off. I dared finally to talk about my nightmares, about what I see around. I told her everything. It was the first person who actually knew. I was afraid to talk with David about this, so I kept it in myself for so long. And I dared to tell her because I was trusting her only. She told me she's going to talk with a higher midwife who is working with mental health, but she thinks I have depression or PTSD. She told me that she's gonna contact me later that day, and she did. She texted me that her superior told her that I should sign up for steps to change. I did. I signed up. I'm happy I did, and I dared to do it, and I started therapy. Now it helped so much to talk with someone. The therapist wasn't telling me what to do or how to think. She was helping me to put my thoughts in their place, to help myself to control my thoughts and to don't let the bad memories and bad thoughts to come over the good ones. I remember she told me our mind, it's like a drawer, and sometimes it's just opening random shelves, and we have to know how to keep shut those bad shells and to let open just the good ones. My therapist's name is Sarah, so Sarah, it's an amazing person. I can say that I got better because of her. If you feel down, just make sure you get help, because alone it's impossible to go through this kind of situations. So my whole second pregnancy, everyone was telling me I must have cesarean. Now after that 23 weeks, and after I found out about sepsis, I started to have even worse feelings about giving birth and about having another cesarean. Towards the end of the pregnancy, I've got this email from a lady called Yvonne. What I can say, she was that angel who touched me on my shoulder with her hand and helped me so much. So she made me an appointment, and we was talking about how am I going to give birth. Everyone till that moment told me about that I must have cesarean. Now came this lady and she said that you can have natural birth after cesarean. I was confused, like, how can you tell me this after everyone said no? And she stayed with me and she explained to me all the benefits and risks of giving birth naturally and giving birth through cesarean. After I spoke with her, I said I'm going for natural birth. I was 36 weeks pregnant when I started to have contractions. I called to the hospital. I told them I feel these weird pains. I went to hospital. They told me I have water infection. They gave me antibiotics. They sent me home. Next day, the contractions were so bad. I called to hospital. I didn't knew I have contractions, so I didn't knew how contractions are feeling or how should they feel. So I called to hospital. I told them I have these weird pains. What do I do? And I told them I don't want to come again till Lincoln Hospital and to be sent back. So what should I do? They heard on the phone the way how I was doing when I had the pain. So she said, you know what, it sounds like contractions, so come to hospital, you must come. I got to hospital. They were checking my contractions with that weird machine. You're gonna have here somewhere a picture. And they told me that I'm going home with a baby. Now, I still had those stitches on my cervix, so I asked them, can you please take them out, because I'm scared. They took out the stitches, and almost instantly I got dilated 4 centimeters. So contractions started to be worse and worse, more and more painful. This was on 19th of August when I got to hospital at 11 on night. At 3 in the morning on 20th of August, in my bag they put the epidural. It didn't work. They've put it second time at 5 in the morning. They were afraid not to be too late. So they put me second time. The epidural was perfectly working. At 12 on day, a doctor came in. He checked me and he said from 9 in the morning, it was already 12 and I was still 9 centimeters dilated. He said that has to be cesarean. I had a panic attack. I was so scared. I was crying so badly that one midwife was shouting at him that he cannot do such thing in front of the patient. He has to talk with the midwives, and the midwives are coming to tell to the patient calmly. And I've heard everything. She was telling him that I have a past. He has to see what I went through first time. He cannot just come like that and say you're gonna be cut again. I said that I don't want to see him anymore. I don't want to see him anymore. And a second midwife was trying to relax me, and I said I want to talk with Yvonne. And they had no idea actually at the beginning who I was talking about. So they was looking in the hospital, who is this Yvonne? They found her. Lucky she was at work, and she came and she was there next to me till I gave birth. Now she convinced me that I need cesarean because otherwise baby will die. I accepted the cesarean, and you see, when they moved me from the delivery room into the theater, they had to disconnect the epidural and to put the to give me mask, the gas. It's their fault for what happened next. So I had this gas and I was screaming over the hospital till they bring me to the theater that they are criminals, they want to kill me, I am going to die. God, it was terrible. Now it's funny, but in those moments wasn't at all. When I was on my way to the theater, I started to feel the need of pushing, so I was pushing. They moved me from my bed on the table from the theater, and they connected me back to the epidural, and they saw that I am going to give birth, the baby is coming. So they told me, you are going to give birth naturally. I was still with some gas in me, so I was happy like a child. In 5 minutes, I had my baby. I cannot explain with words how good it felt that I gave birth naturally and not with cesarean again. I have to say a huge thank you for Yvonne, and I said that when Luna is gonna be 1 year old, I'm gonna send her an email. It helped me so much to have a good experience after the traumatic experience. Now, after I gave birth, I still had to do for a few weeks therapy. I had 12 sessions and it helped me a lot. I didn't have the nightmares anymore. On my last appointment with the therapist, she told me that my PTSD was 60 something or 80 something, and it went down to 12, and my depression as well from 60 or 80 went down to 16. She said that these numbers are really good, and she's happy with how I went through all the therapy sessions, and we ended the therapy sessions. What I want to say is, before you have to give birth, you must do your research about how you can end up having a cesarean if you want to give birth naturally. What are the risks of giving birth naturally and giving birth with cesarean? You must do your research. I wasn't prepared mentally for having a cesarean. In my head, everything was pink, I'm gonna go, I push once, baby it's out, I'm done. It's not like that. After the cesarean, I recovered in 3 or 4 months. That's how long it took me to recover. After the natural birth, I recovered in 2 weeks. But as soon as I got home from the hospital, I was able to clean up the house, I was able to move around, I was able to pick up my other baby, I was able to do so many things. After the cesarean, I wasn't able to stand up from the bed on my own for very long time. Just make sure you do your research properly. This is what I went through, this is my own experience. I hope it's gonna help someone. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't done it yet, make sure you subscribe, it helps me a lot. Give it a like if you liked it, and see you next time. Bye!